We want to welcome everybody joining us today for another conversation on the Word of Mouth podcast presented by Johnny Davis Digital Solutions. We're joined today with Jason Phillips, the CEO of Phillips Collection, a premier home furnishings brand headquartered here in High Point, North Carolina. So, Jason, thank you so much for coming in today. I know that market's gearing up and we're all crazy busy, so I can't appreciate enough the idea that you found time to come in and talk to us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, that's great. That's perfect. So as we start, I know you know a little bit about our company, and we know a lot about Phillips Collection. They are an icon of the furniture industry, but they are also an icon in High Point. From the airport in Greensboro, when you land at PTI, you see Phillips Collection, which is pretty amazing to receive. We receive our visitors, we pick them up at the airport, and they stop and they're seeing this and they're saying, what is that? I would like you to kind of tell our listener a little bit, someone who may not be familiar with Phillips Collection, sort of where your home is, like where you corner that market.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me on. Yep. And I love that you mentioned the airport. That's an example. I'm going to bring up my father a lot during this interview. He is the founder of the company. He moved our business here from New York when we were around 1983. He founded the company. 20 years later, made the decision to move the family business from New York to North Carolina. We were already showing at market, and as you said, getting off the plane. It's no accident that we have a display at the airport.
Okay.
And it's funky furniture. It's upscale. It's different. That's going to come up a lot on this conversation.
Very eclectic designs.
And confidently eclectic.
Yes.
Which I know some of the listeners here might be younger, thinking about getting involved in this business or any creative endeavor. And I hope one thing that comes across today is to follow your passions. It could sound cliche, but I'll paint the story of why that worked for my family. And now that I'm running the company, but still very much with Dad, over my shoulder, gently over my shoulder, he's happy in his new role. But I'm very conscious of preserving that legacy and steering us intentionally towards a bright future.
That's great. That's perfect. And you're right. It is funky and it is eclectic, but there's such a consciousness behind that the design, and where it is iconic. I mean, there's a reason that the Phillips Collection, I call it a seatbelt chair. It may have a different name.
Nope, that's the name.
It is the seatbelt chair.
Seatbelt chair.
But there's a reason that became the icon for High Point.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean,
that's as flattering as it gets when the Visitors Bureau adopted it as their logo.
At the furniture capital of the world.
The furniture capital of the world.
That's pretty cool.
In a city that we rightly so are known for the chest of drawers.
Yeah.
At Furnitureland South, beautiful landmarks around the city. But yes, the seatbelt chair, which is quite modern, from a Thai designer who was a student at the time, 25 years ago when we found the chair, and became the exclusive distributor of it. It's gained lots of recognition over the years, famously in the Hunger Games. Yep. It's on Keeping Up with the Kardashians and Kylie Jenner's home, where there's a famous guacamole fight that kind of mortified us because guacamole got all over our chairs. But it just goes to show that there is a segment of the industry, a growing segment that embraces high design.
Right.
And design that sparks curiosity.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess to just, sort of roll the clock back a little bit, from your father started the company in 1983, you went to school for design. Were you already sort of following this pathway from childhood? Like, tell me what, young Jason is learning and experiencing and seeing, in his father's, industry.
Young Jason was seeing mom and dad working very hard, traveling the world, taking us with them to Southeast Asia at a very young age, which at the time you're a child, you don't fully understand what you're being immersed in. But in my teens, I certainly realized the impact that had on my life. So seeing artisans, watching a product get developed, watching a price get negotiated, Going back a year later and seeing that industry thriving and the growth in a community, Dad and Mom always sought out small artisan communities. An impact that I didn't even realize at the time. We're known for sustainability now, reclaiming tree roots, and it's very obviously intrinsically sustainable. But sustainability comes in many forms. So when you're helping to support a community, if you're in the rug business, if you're in the lighting business, businesses that we're not in, you're doing something sustainable. You're creating economy. You're helping people feed their families.
It's true.
And as you are successful, you see growth. And that was an impact from a young age. So yes, I studied design at University of Michigan,
Okay.
industrial design,
Okay.
but fine art throughout my childhood. And I think there are different types of artists and creatives. I think we all have it in us. And I'm a little bit colorblind. I always had that, which is a significant hindrance as a child when you're trying to paint and you can't mix the color or identify a color. It wasn't a travesty, but I realized I had this hurdle I had to overcome because I love doing art. So I focused on pencil work. I focused on sculpture. I get to college and I knew I was going to go into the family business. It was just too enticing not to. And industrial design just felt like the right move. It's portfolio building and presentation. It's problem solving. There's a bit of engineering, a bit of design, a lot of studying what the public needs a solution for. So I loved it, and then came right down to North Carolina. We had just moved the company down. It kind of timed perfectly when I got out of college, and we were a small but growing company here in High Point and have grown a lot since, and I've been very proud and fortunate to be part of that.
So a little side question, just because I'm curious, as you're talking about how you sort of approach design, with the hurdle, needing to be overcome with color blindness,
Mhm.
and you said you were working a lot with graphite and lead and sculpture and things like that.
Yes.
Is that why when we look at the Phillips Collection line that we see a lot of natural woods, natural metals? Like these are not things that you have to worry about. Is this my green or their green?
Yes.
This is
I'd like to
nature's
think
green.
I've steered it to a neutral palette,
Okay.
maybe subconsciously. There's so much risk in picking the wrong color. And there's something about chasing fashion when you go for color. Homes need color. We don't want to be responsible for picking the right or wrong color. You kind of have to rest a lot on that. Whereas silver metals versus gold metals versus brass metals, they'll always be timeless. The market may shift one way or another. Right now, the industry is tired of gray, lighter wood tones. But focusing on natural materials was no accident. It's part of our ethos, and it's this palette that never goes out of fashion.
No, you're exactly right. And
Yeah.
Phillips Collection, you do so well mixed woods, mixed metals. You do so well with, you can create a room with these statement pieces, that they're iconic, but they're so I'm trying to think of a better word than just agreeable. Like they're never, it catches your eye as soon as you walk past it. You need to stop and study it. It's a piece you see in a museum, you're figuring it out. You're trying to get the story behind the piece, because every piece that Phillips Collection does has these beautiful stories. The Atlas, I'm thinking of the Atlas Collection.
Yeah.
The Atlas Collection is gorgeous, and that is natural wood, natural metals, and it's sculpture, and it's industrial design, and it's
Hint
beautiful.
of whimsy
Yes,
in
and
that
there's the
figure
whimsy.
that's holding it up. I'm glad you're touching on this because we've started geeking out on a new study called The Science in Design. That this is Mike Peterson, very involved with HPXD, the High Point by Design group. They're going to be speaking at the upcoming market and have a seminar
We're filming it.
that we're supporting. You're filming it, lovely. And this is about how it is proven now that certain iconography in products, certain materials actually improve your health.
Oh, wow.
And I can go off a big deep end here. There's probably not enough time, and
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to leave a little cliffhanger for the audience to go
Yes.
check this out.
For sure.
But there are motifs that we didn't realize we were incorporating into our product. Why is a sanded piece of wood mounted on a base universally loved and strikes a chord with you? And it's something in our DNA wants us to be out in nature. So we're bringing nature into the home. It's always been a part of what we do, but now it's sort of once you hear it, it makes sense. You know, we are living in cities, concrete, steel, glass. It's not the natural human environment. There's science as to what makes an apartment comfortable. Big bay window overlooking Central Park is sort of everyone's aspiration, not
Right.
just because of the address or the cost of the property, but because it's considered refuge.
Yeah.
You have safety behind you. Think of the caveman living in a cave at elevation. You can see very far out in front of you, lush green landscape, no predators. Once you start going down this rabbit hole of science-backed information about why we react to certain things, it's fascinating.
That is very interesting, and it does. I've read articles, from a health standpoint, where if you realize that you're craving bananas, you probably have a potassium deficiency. Like you probably don't have enough potassium. If you're craving certain foods that have a lot of iron, your body is telling you I need more iron.
Interesting.
So it
Makes
seems like
sense.
what we're kind of telling ourselves is we need the safety and security and the modern convenience of our home, but we also want the beauty and the aesthetic and the grounding effect of nature.
Yes.
So it's and that makes sense. We have seen, since the pandemic, I have seen a ton of houseplants.
Mm.
People didn't really care about houseplants as much, and now people that you wouldn't think are just sprouting off these names of these houseplants
Yep.
that we've never really cared about so
Yep.
much, but people are
I
realizing
love it.
they need to have that back in their life. And that is very
There's
fascinating.
a new trend emerging, which is no hard edges. So everything that you're seeing, and we're in 2025 right now, is trending towards curves on upholstery, curves on tables. A home full of curves and soft edges, I think, is a safer home.
It is.
So I wonder if trends are changing
Yeah.
and shifting, and if we're improving in terms of what we look at. It's the consumer no longer just wants beautiful. We've accomplished beautiful in this industry, and there's some timeless pieces like an Eames lounge chair that just I think will forever exist, but it's got soft edges, it's comfortable, it embraces you. I think it's hit all the things we want. I think we might get to this at some point in the talk, but heirloom quality pieces that you want to live with forever has always been part of our mantra. We don't feel like you should need to buy a new coffee table every few years to keep up with the
Agreed.
trends. It should be your last coffee table if you're so
Agreed.
lucky. Things change. You may want to replace it one day, but you shouldn't have to. So from a construction standpoint, a durability, a timeless aesthetic. But going back to the curves, I'd love to see that curves are something here to stay,
Me too.
because I'd rather knock into a curved coffee table than a very sharp-edged one, right?
Absolutely. And I know you have children. I have a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I
Mhm.
can tell you that anything hard edge in the house is like just
Yes.
it's an accident waiting to happen. But it also reminds me, as we're talking about sort of this um, a lot of design ends up being very cyclical. And I think that when we're seeing more of these curved edges, we're seeing a modern interpretation of essentially some of the design that was created during the Art Nouveau period, where you had the
Mm.
waterfall edges on dressers and you had sofas and Chesterfields that had these very voluminous arms and backs, but it
Mhm.
was a sofa you didn't sit on, you sat in.
I love it.
And so we went away from that. We got to that Scandinavian design, the very minimal, very sharp edge. And
Mhm.
now it seems like we're kind of returning back to those organic turns. And I wonder if that is because we're trying to get back to a little bit of nature, and there's no
Yeah.
straight lines in nature. So is that why we're starting to see more organic shape in our homes?
Yeah.
Like we're surrounded with straight walls and boxes, and maybe we want the stuff inside there to be a little bit more supple and
I'll
organic.
go one step further. Something we think about a lot, especially in the Phillips Collection showroom, you have a lot of products begging for your attention.
Yes.
We have to fill it up. It's a showroom. It has to be maximize shoppability. We're in business to stay in business, and you've got a lot of things your eye is going to. But in a home, we know you're never going to fill your house, or you really shouldn't fill your house with an exorbitant amount of product and places for your eye to land on. It's too much. The Scandinavian look, which I love, tends towards maybe ultra minimalism, which I think people almost went there to escape from maximalism.
Right.
But minimalism, I think, was one step too far. So now there's this kind of balanced, I'm struggling to find the word and it might come to me, but somebody's coined a term for what the new movement is, which is a balance between the two.
I
So
think I
and
just
it's
heard that term.
yeah, and
I'm
it's what spaces in your home. I think we made a mistake in our industry. No one specific to blame, but part of an HGTV movement of take all the walls down in your house. Open floor
Yeah,
plan
open floor plans. Yeah.
is really hard to maintain. In hindsight, it's really easy to understand why that happened. It literally was easy on a home repair show in 30 minutes to take walls down than to put walls up. But now you've got smells from the kitchen wafting across the house. You can't just clean one space. You can't have this area blue if you're not going to tie blue elements into every other area. So you were forced to have this monotonous landscape with too many things you're seeing. So you had to minimalize it. I think we're moving back towards smaller spaces because as much as you want your kitchen to maybe exude a peaceful calm for the morning light to come in, natural materials, light surfaces, your library, if you have a home that could have a study or a library, you want it to be darker, softer, more comfortable, more relaxing, but maybe the bar area could be louder and more vibrant with harder edges. So, we sell items, not everything in our line is natural soft woods, which do have that calming effect. We have silver rhino heads on the
Yep.
wall, fake rhino heads. We've been accused of the opposite, but I assure you these were
Sustainability.
carved in clay and cast in resin. But that gives you a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
You put a silver animal head on the wall, it exudes excitement.
It's excitement, and I do like, and I think that when we first started this conversation, elegant whimsy it's easy to overdo it, and there are brands that will overdo that whimsy, and I've seen some of those wall-mounted animals, that where they're fake, but sometimes just like, unless you're in college, don't hang that on your
Yes.
wall.
Oh, of
But there's a
course.
way to do it right where
Yeah.
and it's almost a tongue-in-cheek thing of like, I'm not going to go hunt a rhino, but I do appreciate a rhino, like,
Yes.
this rhino did not risk anything to be here, but now you've got this powerful statement piece. You put a piece
Yeah.
like that on your wall, someone walks in, their eyes are going right
Yep.
to it.
You're not going to forget that room.
Gosh,
And
no.
our interior designer customers, that's the business they're in, creating
Yep.
memorable spaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And when you were talking about kind of creating more intimate spaces in homes instead of those big open floor plans, I think it also helps from the interior design perspective because when you have an open floor plan, you essentially have four walls. And if you are going to just furnish every one of those four walls, it looks cluttered. It looks a
Mhm.
little less intentional.
Yep.
Whereas if you have the hallways and the nooks and those small little intimate areas, you can sort of tell a separate story in each one of those areas.
Yeah.
So when someone comes into your library and they sit down, you want them to feel relaxed, but you want them to feel introspective.
Mhm.
This is a place where you're with your thoughts, you're with a good book, you're
Yep.
maybe learning something, maybe taking a nap in the sun, something like that. Whereas you come into, more of a community room or a family room, this is the place where we want to get together. We want to invite you in, like this is
Absolutely.
community.
I think the size of the home also has an impact on that.
For sure.
I think a 1,000 square foot or smaller home could really benefit from big open floor
Yeah.
plan. You
Yeah.
get into a bigger home, and now you're talking about sound deadening.
Right.
Like, when did I used to think about sound deadening? And now
Right.
it's like such a big part of our lives.
Yeah.
If a home full of furniture will have less echoing.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
there
Yeah.
are all these things that I think tastes evolve. I think
Mhm.
the industry evolves. I think taking all the walls down in a home will prove to have been a mistake.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that it's more, speaking, just completely personally, I think there's more of you have that moment of like, oh, this is amazing. This is new. I'm
New.
walking into my door and my house looks different on the inside. But
Mhm.
then after a while, you start thinking about the form and the function and sort of that push and pull of it. And you start
Mhm.
realizing, oh, I kind of missed that
Yeah.
wall there. I kind of missed that door.
I'd like to think Phillips Collection as a brand has evolved over time, but sort of like a slow-moving ship of evolution.
Yeah.
We're not chasing trends, which I think sometimes companies that focus too much on color or trend could feel like fast fashion. Shout out to Palachek, which are friends of ours. Palachek Home stays so true to this California comfortable natural material motif, and kudos to them because not only has it never gotten out of fashion, but just you go to Palachek for that. Um, there's enough business out there for all of us. So you have to, as a company, and Palachuk certainly evolves their look. Every year has something new that's beautiful,
Yep.
that's hit the mark. You have to evolve, but you, I think, can't be running in circles as a company.
Absolutely. Right.
And we know that we have eclectic product. I'm oftentimes enticed as to what's next steps for Phillips. I think about mainstream, which is not I don't mean that word in a bad way, but mass appeal. When we do something like a silver tree trunk side table, I know I'm not capturing the entire market. So if I made that a different color, a little simpler, I might get more interest. Do we lose our soul? Do we lose our core customer? I don't think so, but we have to be intentional about the steps we make as a company. And I think some of the best brands out there confidently stay true to who they are.
I agree. I think that when you try to change with every whim, with every season, with every new trend and style, you never really develop anything that is truly iconic to your brand.
Yes.
And I think that what Phillips Collection does well, they are a Coca-Cola. Like they are as classic and as signature as it can possibly be. It's iconic. At a moment's notice, you're looking at a piece from Phillips. And it doesn't mean that it's not still something you've never seen before. In fact, I've never been in your showroom and not seen something or many things new. And I'm talking within the same market. I'll think, I don't think I was even in this room. Like I think somehow I missed this entire room.
Well, that's a huge compliment to hear that. That's sort of, we are much more critical of ourselves.
Really?
Like, man, did we come out with anything new this market? But I think to our customers, and I'm remembering now, we're always telling them, take another lap around, you'll see something new. There is so much to see and take in. And the fact that you say that when you see a piece, it's us, I think speaks volumes of what our design team has done all these years.
And I think it's, I was in Florida last year, and I didn't realize that I was in, I think it was a hotel or a bar, and the bar was done by Phillips Collection.
Love it.
It was like a 65-foot live edge wood sculptured bar.
Wow.
And I believe it was a Phillips Collection bar that was made. And it was pretty amazing, and you do see that footprint. You see it in Hollywood, you see it coastal. And I think that is one of the nice things that Phillips Collection does, is for the amount of iconic design that you and your designers are constantly chasing, it is Hollywood recognizable. You see it in a movie and immediately you say, oh, I know that. Like, there's one like that in the world. It's like seeing a Bugatti on the road, like you're not confusing that for a Kia, like it's, and I think that is something to say, because there are, like automobiles, we do have a lot in our industry of brands that will say, we're going to stay middle of the road, very, blasé,
safe.
Very bland, safe. Yeah. And
there's money in safe.
Yeah, there's money in safe, but I think that when you're surprised when someone will say, oh, that sofa is such and such, and you're like, oh, like it's kind of like when you see a car going down the road and you think it's a Ford and it's a Mercedes, and you're like, that's weird. Mercedes, you shouldn't be mistaken for a Ford ever. Like, that's odd. Like, so I think Phillips Collection is very good about knowing the world that they work in, and then also knowing the way to keep kind of blazing the trail to say, we know where we're going and we're doing it intentionally, and we're making these small, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon, and it is part of building a legacy to the brand. And I do want to get into the legacy of the brand of Phillips, but I do want to kind of maybe take a little bit of a sidestep. You had mentioned the sustainability. I would like to talk a little bit about the Green Award that you just received. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into that, and what that means for you as a company?
Yeah, probably the best type of an award we could win is something focused on sustainability. We care a lot about our impact on the planet. We want to be not only minimally invasive, and I can talk about how we procure material and how we use material, but we want to actually affect change on a bigger scale. And there's only so much you can do as an individual, as a company. But if you can get on your soapbox, and I think we have quite a soapbox to get other companies to realize they can do things as well, I think that's where change really starts to happen. That's the snowball effect. So maybe some of what I'm about to talk about could make others out there aware of how they could be more sustainable.
Yes.
We celebrate material and what some might consider imperfections. We've changed the terminology character. So the different character in wood.
I
Yes,
like
this
that.
piece of wood has a crack or a knot or requires a butterfly joint to hold it together. We love that. We've actually learned how to make that our secret sauce. When you procure a piece of wood, a fallen log, you could either find the best, most perfect pieces from it and throw away the rest, or you
Right.
can use every part of it, kind of
like
like the
that.
Eskimos would do.
Yeah.
And we really do feel like that's how we treat wood. So a tree that's 100 feet tall has a root system that goes out the same distance, 100 feet wide.
Wow.
So we dig up the roots of long ago felled trees, turn them into table bases and sculptures. We use every part of the trunk. So the stump can become a table base. The trunk becomes slabs. The crown, where the trunk becomes those heavy branches, can become console and entryway tables. You've seen enough of our
And
product,
beautiful ones. And
maybe
we will make sure that we're going to put the some of these iconic pieces, because I know that we've got people listening right now and they're probably already Googling Phillips Collection because they need to. And once they do, I imagine most people are going to say, oh, I do recognize that. Like I've seen those, and those consoles are gorgeous.
And there are people, we were not the first people to work with wood and celebrate wood. I mean, when it comes to slabs, George Nakashima, the Japanese-American artist of the mid-20th century, pioneered this and made it beautiful and is highly collectible, and his daughter has carried on the tradition. We have our own take on it. I think we're a little more minimalist in our material. A successful product for us is a silhouette and a material story. And it's not embellished for the sake of embellishment. Other companies do that. Nothing against embellishment. But we think our strongest products survive just on one or two design elements.
I like that.
It's like, as a designer, I remember in school, you always want those limitations.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I got to make a desk out of wood. Got it.
Right.
Please don't give me any more.
No more parameters.
No more parameters. That's enough. Don't make it open-ended, but don't tell me one more thing.
Right.
So I feel like two elements. If you can make something iconically yours with two elements, and this plays into a lot of different industries. It could be fashion. It could be anything. I think you've got a really nice kind of parameter scope. So yeah, when it comes to sustainability, we're working with woods that are responsibly reclaimed. So no trees are being cut down for the purpose of making Phillips Collection furniture and sculpture.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah, we're collecting pieces of wood that have fallen naturally. We are working with government contracted infrastructure projects. So if they're widening a highway in Southeast Asia, we pay for the rights to take the pieces of wood that had to come down anyway.
Right.
Using every part of that tree. We're replanting.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah,
We're
you
creating
are replanting forest.
Replanting forest, creating botany classes so that kids around the world know about the beauty of nature that surrounds them, how to care for, how to identify the species of plants and trees and animals that surround them, rebuilding playgrounds. There's a lot of things we're doing on that end.
I would love to see a playground designed by Phillips Collection.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I would love.
It's pretty wild. Even here in High Point, life-size dinosaurs at the Nito Quabain Children's Museum came from us.
That's amazing.
So yes, we're not just in the wood business.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And in our warehouse, there could be a T-Rex at any given moment. It's pretty wild. All the way to energy efficiency locally. So we're just, as we speak, installing a solar array. It's the biggest solar project going into High Point at the moment.
Wow.
Probably not the biggest ever, and hopefully not the biggest to come. But right on our property, right off the highway, people are going to see this beautiful solar farm where we're going to be carbon neutral at the very least, working with the city of High Point on that. Energy efficient LEDs, recycling our cardboard, all the vehicles that get us around the warehouse faster are electric powered. Some of us drive Teslas at the company, and we have a Tesla charging station. So how can a company be sustainable if you're not working with reclaimed wood? That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
There are ways to be sustainable that far exceed material usage. It's just one of many ingredients.
I think it's looking at it the way a designer looks at any other problem. It's not, what's right in front of you. It's finding, it's drilling down a little bit deeper than surface level and
Yeah.
saying maybe it's not the reclaimed wood, but what are we using that we can either change or create a different way around and
Yep.
kind of figure that out. And I applaud Phillips Collection because with such a name, with such a footprint, in the home furnishings industry, you really are a vanguard, and when you mentioned before that you're getting on a soapbox and you're kind of not chastising other companies, but you are allowing the creatives and the designers like yourself and other companies to say, well, hold on, if they're looking at this problem from a different angle,
Mm-hmm.
why can't we? And
Yeah.
I think that when you start having that community conversation, that's
Yeah.
when you start seeing an industry adapt. It's always slow move. For years we've had small little panel discussions during the market about green furniture,
Mm-hmm.
green movements, and it's always been sort of yeah, it'd be nice, but and now the last couple years you're really starting to see concentrated, not just panels, but entire advocacy groups that
Yeah.
are really kind of pushing, this is how you make this beautiful, this is how you make this sustainable, and this is how you make this iconic.
Yep.
And all three of those things can, you can Venn diagram those together, and if you can place yourself right in the middle of that Venn diagram, you've got a huge future ahead of you.
And it's good for the planet.
It is.
So, of course, on one end, I could say I'd love to sell you a new coffee table every year.
Right.
That lines my pockets. But I want to make a table that could last your lifetime and hopefully aesthetically is not something you want to get rid of. What's a sustainable piece of furniture? Fast-growing bamboo, a
Right.
low VOC finish on top of it that's highly durable. But if that's a table that you're going to want to replace every few years, is
Right.
that more sustainable than a hardwood table with maybe a higher, um, maybe something that has more particulates to get into the air in terms of the finish that goes on it? I'm not here to say one is better than the other, but there's an argument to be made that if it's a one-time production over 50 years versus a very renewable, every 5 years you're replacing it, which is more sustainable? So I think we have to build things that last. I think we have to stop chasing trends for trend's sake.
Yes.
But I'm also realistic. I can't fault a company for wanting to have the hot next thing.
Yeah.
60,000 people come to High Point twice a year to shop for furniture. They don't want to see what's old. They
Yeah,
want to see
right.
what's new. Is it the way you position your message, the way you show the product? There are a lot of entities out there. I think of Heller Furniture, which is a great example. Working with plastics, but trying to use responsible plastics. But they have iconic designs that they sell tons of, but it's a limited SKU count, and it's sort of a forever palette of kind of like Eames or Herman Miller. You're going to have the same things there year after year. And seatbelt chair is a good example from us of something that I never want to go away. I want that to be popular, and maybe we improve the construction, the quality over the years, nuance it a little, like
Yeah.
a Porsche 911. To somebody that doesn't know, thinks they're looking at the same thing from 2005 or 2025.
Right.
To the discerning eye, there's a big difference.
It changed. Right.
But it changed. But they have something brilliant there in that
Yeah.
form.
So when we talk about, the kind of steering away from the sustainability, I did like the fact that you touched on, and this has been something that's been kind of, in my mind for years, as long as I've been in this industry. There's a lot of conversations that I think that we as an industry need to, kind of reshape the vernacular on. And one of those is the term heirloom pieces. I think that the majority of the public, when I would say the word an heirloom piece, they're picturing an old shaker style credenza from 1983 that, blah, blah, blah. And so when we talk today and we say, well, why are we going through furniture so fast? Why are we in such a disposable, mindset when it comes to furniture, beautiful furniture? Why aren't we making more heirloom pieces that are able to be passed down? Because you're not talking about the design being sacrificed there. You're talking about the quality of the material and the durability of not just the construction, but the durability of the design, the longevity of the design. And I feel like if we can start having more of a conversation about the sustainability, build a beautiful cocktail table, build it beautiful, build it sustainable, build it beautiful. Don't throw it away in 3 years. have that be something you're going to pass down. I'm constantly reminded of. I was talking to someone, and they said that when their grandma or their great grandma was getting ready to pass on, that people were saying that, well, what are we going to do with all the furnishings in the home? Over 40 years, people had actually written their name on the underside of certain pieces
Yeah.
when they said, "I want grandma's table. I want grandma's credenza. I want grandma's china cabinet." Back then, and you're talking Art Nouveau era, you're talking mid-century modern era. There were designs even back then that were absolutely gorgeous. I'm thinking of Raymond Sabota with Century Furniture when he
Yep.
designed the Chinois collection. That is just as iconic today as
Yes.
it was when he first designed that in the 60s. And, if you have that and you're passing that down to then say, I'd rather get something new and just throw it away. It just seems like that is such a crime, not just from the sustainability side, but from the design, the legacy, and the icon.
Well, I think you nailed it. I think grandmas and grandpas have to etch their names into the furniture, and
That's
then we'll
exactly.
keep it,
Yeah, that's
if nothing else. But it's very interesting. I think limiting elements that might get dated.
right.
Not to get back to cars, we can talk
No,
about things
yeah.
other than cars, but a Bugatti does not have an infotainment screen in it.
No,
It might have some digital elements, but
right.
it doesn't have it because think about what gets dated so fast.
Oh, absolutely. The technology
Now
in the
it's all
car.
about CarPlay. If a
Yep.
car doesn't have CarPlay, we don't want it. If you
Right.
can't retrofit it, you don't want it. But in 10 years, CarPlay is going to be a thing of the past. I don't know what's going to have evolved. Not every car company can afford to do that, but Bugatti brilliantly just puts a clock, an analog clock, and that's what you have. You've got, yeah, and it's, you can't date a Bugatti for that reason because it's sort of the first thing your eye goes to. So whether we knew it or not, limiting the elements that go into the design of something, an embellishment, a mother of pearl inlay could be super hot right now, but it's not going to be hot forever. Is it a crime to make a table too simple? I don't think so. I don't think there's one table I've ever looked at. I don't think the listeners or viewers can see your side table, but it's such a simple form and just one finish. Like that's perfect Phillips Collection. Like that nails what we don't like to discontinue. So we think, if you put too much of a curve on something or a sweeping curve is very different than just a curved side.
Absolutely.
It could date it. And, refinishing furniture, I think, gives it a whole new life. I'd implore anybody out there that's struggling with, do I keep something or not, to maybe pay to have a piece refinished.
Absolutely.
It
No,
just changes. It's brand new again.
But for God's sake, and anyone who's listening out there, don't chalk paint your pieces of furniture ever again. Like ever.
Yes.
Like that was such a
Yes.
that went on far too long.
Yep.
Let it go. But I agree. And I think that, in design school, we're taught less is more. It's kind of beat into us. Less is more. You're going to put yourself in handcuffs and you're going to tighten the handcuffs down. You're going to say, how creative can you get within this limited, tiny little limited space?
Yeah.
But sometimes those are where the best ideas, those most iconic, pieces come from.
Yeah.
And you're right, in cars, Bugatti as a company, while they are at the absolute leading tip of advanced technology and speed and horsepower, torque, everything else, you could take a 2025 Bugatti and you could take a 1938 Bugatti and you can say, yeah, this is the same exact lines. Jaguar, Maserati, BMW, Land Rover, nobody else does that to that degree. The Jaguar, and I think Jaguar has fought themselves for years now. And they just did that rebrand. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Yes. The whole world saw that.
Why was everybody not fired?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. I thought that was such a ham-handed approach to such a beautiful company.
Yes. It's interesting. I've studied it a little bit, just trying to get both perspectives of it. And I think they knew they were on a sinking ship, in their opinion. And I don't know the financials of it, but I think there's a difference in slowly becoming out of favor and righting the ship. And maybe their financials were at a point where like, we have one last shot at this and we're just going to be an entirely new company. They definitely got talked about.
Yeah, I mean, they say that what is it? Any press is good press.
Yeah, but I think their realization was their core audience was aging, They missed an entire demographic, and now they're going after a new generation. So I'd love to see a Cinderella story at the end of it, because
Oh,
I
it'd be
love
amazing.
Jaguars and I love what the
I do
brand
too.
was, and the new brand is it's they're focused on Middle East and the wealth in the Middle East, where you, in their opinion, want to be showier, and that new model is super showy, and that blue finish, it is like, I'm a little colorblind and I can even tell it that's a
It's
loud
yeah,
color.
and the blue color is a statement color. I
Yeah.
mean, that is a stunning color. And if the folks that are listening to this right now do not know what we're talking about, you definitely should just do a Google search on the new campaign
Yeah.
that Jaguar launched earlier this year.
Yeah.
And it is wild to me that it's not like almost an art statement piece from somebody else,
Yes.
almost like tongue
Yeah,
in
it
cheek.
seems like a meme
Yeah, it does.
of
But
a
maybe
company
that's what
that
they were
had,
going
I mean,
for.
it's very obvious they had one shot
Yeah.
and they took it. We'll see what happens,
Yeah,
but it is wild.
that is
You
exceptional.
know, I often think about where I just took over running the company. Dad is still very much involved in traveling and doing what he does so well, which I'd love to talk about.
I would like to get into that, the Indiana Jones
Yeah, and it's
story.
sort of like the what if. And I
Right.
think not many companies are fortunate enough to be able to say what if. We're
Yep.
not a giant company, but I think we are a company that's able to say what if. And that's what my dad's always done. He's very entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurs geek out over starting something new. There's whether they're addressing a problem in the world. What if cars could be electric? What if we got off planet? Not to let's not go on an Elon Musk tangent here, but Dad has always looked at materials and regions of the world that are underdeveloped and said, what if we could take a chair like the seatbelt chair and expose it to the world? What if we could modernize Live Edge? What if we could take material from a factory in the Philippines that does resin casting and cast pieces of wood and cast rocks and turn them into these really funky products? And we've been doing it, and there are a lot of what ifs that turned out to be failures. I think we have a great marketing team that positions us to look like we've never made a mistake
Oh,
ever.
yeah. I mean,
Credit to
honestly,
the marketing team, but no, but I love that we're a company that says what if. So now that I'm running the company, one of the things I try to think about every week is that question: what
really.
if? What if we did this? And I'm not my father, but I look up to him. He's my mentor, and I've worked with him my whole career. Um,
Do you have his shoe collection, or are you
oh
still
no,
building that,
my
or is
God!
that
We have different shoe sizes. To anybody that doesn't
well,
know,
that's a
there's
good thing.
basically like there should be an Instagram account.
There should.
There's probably a handle for
There
my
should.
father's shoes at market. I mean, even at Atlanta Market a
Mark
decade
shoes.
ago, 2 Chains, and my father had a shoe off,
No way.
if that's even a term. But we can coin it today.
It's a
They had
shoe
a
off.
shoe off, and yeah, my dad was in like iridescent, pearlescent Louboutins or something, and 2 Chains had some pretty cool shoes on, but he was more interested in Snapchatting, or I think it was Snapchatting at the time, TikToking now on my
That's so
dad's
funny.
shoes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, Dad, do you know who you were just talking to? He's like, I had a feeling it was somebody famous, but no, who was it? So he's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My dad is an icon, and he's one of these that's like not even aware of it, or not even it was never a goal of his.
Right. He is certainly not affected. He is one of the most
Yeah.
down to earth, humble
And
gentlemen that
he's
I've
pretty
ever spoken
dapper
to.
now, but 20 years ago, he was in the grayish or beige that every other professional in the industry wore.
Yep.
He had his glasses, and now he's got, I think LASIK at this point, but
Right.
contacts he shifted to. But he's had a glow up
Yeah.
without even realizing he's had a glow up. And yeah, he's pretty cool.
Well, that is fantastic. So tell me about, we talked about when, you were a child and you were kind of unaware of kind of this incredible childhood that you were a part of with international travel and these, found priceless artifacts,
Yep.
so to speak, as they were being cultivated and unearthed, and all this is going on. So when you got to be a teenager, you did start to appreciate what was going on. So tell me a little bit about that teenage experience of that kind of Indiana Jones effect. Like, what was your school life like? Your friends are talking to you one day and then you're in Indonesia,
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have
that's
to take a trip down memory lane
adventurous.
here. I know I look young, but I'm in my 40s now, and yeah, I grew up on Long Island, New York, which is very much a bubble. And I don't really feel like that is my world, but our world ended at New York City, unless you were fortunate enough to travel. So yeah, from a very young age, I realized there was a bigger world out there. There was poverty. There
Mm,
was a pride for centuries and generations old craft of your family. We would bring our old clothes with us and just see the driver we had, his face light up as he distributed them to the community.
that's awesome.
We didn't have, I later in life started working with the homeless, feeding the homeless, and that like nourishes your soul and is
Absolutely.
like healthy for you as much as you're helping other people. So going around the world, to answer your question, or to not go too far off path here, made me realize something special was happening at our company. That I had parents that cared about doing something meaningful.
That's cool.
It was never about the money, and realizing the success came. I think at many companies you have a few moments of hockey stick growth, and I was there for two of the three, I guess you
Okay.
could say. One happened before I was involved in the business, and you realize that comes not when you're chasing it. It sort of comes when things line up, when you have the right mission or the wrong mission,
I
and
like that.
all cylinders are firing in the right direction.
I like that. And I
Yeah.
think that there is, I'm reminded of Phil Knight, with Nike.
Yep.
One of the principles that Nike laid out from day one was, if we do the right thing, we'll make money damn near automatic, was the
Yeah.
way he worded that in
Mhm.
his company directive. And I think that we as a company, as a creative agency, we've been in existence for 15 years, but only over the last 3 or 4 years have we decided to kind of take our company to more of a, let's see what we can do. What if, we started adapting to that too. And in doing so, we didn't say, how do we make more money? We said, we are storytellers and we
Mm.
are stewards of a lot of the stories that come to us. When we talk to designers, or we talk to furniture designers, we talk to manufacturers, and we hear all these stories, all of these. I call it the Steve Jobs story. When Steve Jobs passed away, within the first 12 to 18 months of his death, we saw two big budget Hollywood biopics made about that man because there was so much more to him that we didn't know. We are storytellers and we hear people's stories. We hear the stories of, people in our industry that, lose sleep, and they have a dream and they spend nights pacing and they try to rot it into existence, and you see these successes and these failures. And so everybody that we have come into contact with has these Steve Jobs stories, just
Yeah.
on a smaller stage or on a different stage. And so when we decided to get into more of the company face, or the public face, it wasn't the idea of how do we make more money. It was, how do we tell these stories?
I love
Like,
it.
we're storytellers.
I mean, when I arrived here today and I saw you guys setting up, I just loved the quality. I hope I'm not ruining it.
I think
But
you're
the
improving it.
quality. Oh, thank you. The quality of the equipment, of the staging that you have here.
Thank you.
I geek out on that stuff. It's a hidden. It's like one of my gripes with color blindness is I never mastered photography. And I love photography. I love taking pictures. And I think my iPhone 10 took the best pictures because I have to take pictures on auto.
Right.
If I touch a
Right.
setting, they're going to be yellow or whatever. Um, and I used to try, but I was geeking out on just how professional your set was.
Well,
That's
thank you.
why a Netflix production on rugby, I can sit there watching because it's telling a
It's the
story,
storytelling.
well edited,
Absolutely.
and high production value.
Yes.
I read a blog recently. I'm curious how you guys feel about this. Shows like Yellowstone, which I haven't watched Yellowstone, but directors like Tarantino look very frown upon shows like that, saying you're using my equipment, so you're making it look beautiful, but it's pretty much a soap opera told in film quality. There's something to it, Tarantino film. I think somebody like that shouldn't get too high on his horse. He should
Nope.
just let his work speak for himself.
Yep.
But, if he can do everything that Yellowstone does in 6 seasons in a 2-hour movie,
Right.
he's probably done something better
Right.
in that sense. But it's interesting. We all have become our tastes have improved so much as a society. Can you imagine watching the next Jurassic Park in 1080p? Like, it has to be 4K or
No,
better.
absolutely.
But it also means the authenticity of the message and not dragging out a message. So part of this blog, and we're getting off topic here a little, but was how a show gets successful. So then you drag out what was supposed to be 3 seasons into 5 seasons.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like you're sitting there middle of season 3 and you're like, what is happening here?
Where else can they go? Right.
Yeah.
And that's when you do have shows that jump the shark or things like that. Now,
Yeah.
I will say for Taylor Sheridan's point, and I haven't read that blog, but I agree with some of that.
Yeah.
I like to be invested in characters that are flawed.
Yeah.
I don't like a Superman character
Mhm.
until he snaps General Zod's neck. I like a flawed protagonist. And
Yeah.
I think that Taylor Sheridan has always been very good, and Yellowstone and all of those spinoffs, as well as the Mayor of Kingstown and the other shows that he's done, he's always been very good about nobody is good. They may be good to their own family, but maybe not good to someone they're dealing with business, or maybe they're shrewd here, but they're generous here.
Yep.
I think that it's more relatable, and I think that that's why it is a kind of a soap opera is really what you're talking about. But, we've always kind of done that as a species too. If you go back to the Westerns of, the Sacketts or Lonesome Dove or Gunsmoke, or,
Yep.
we were falling in love with the characters because we were living and dying with them on screen.
Yep. And their flaws. You're
And
absolutely
they're flawed
right.
individuals.
Yeah.
When you get the sheriff in the white hat and he does no wrong, you can't really relate to him. When you get the John Wayne character in The Searchers and he is a hyper flawed individual, but you're still rooting for him. You want to pull for him because that's the world we actually live in.
Yep.
None of us are perfect, but we like to think of ourselves as more good than bad.
Yep.
So and that's the stories that we actually like to tell in our studio. We like the stories of the suffering. We like the stories of the trial and error and then success, because that success is so much sweeter.
Mhm.
When you're talking about growing with intention, growing because of the desire to improve the world around you, and then having the world around you say, we see you and we embrace this.
Yes.
It's not easy. I mean, how many meetings does your company have on we'll just say a monthly basis regarding sustainability? And that it's not an easy conversation.
Right.
It's not an easy direction. And it is easy to kind of overlook the importance of that as we move forward, from where we are to where we want to be, without going into the Elon Musk conversation of
Yep. Yep. Hey, there's so much talk about big picture thinking though. I mean, yeah, if things go the wrong way, and I'm a forever optimist
Me too.
for our planet, our species. But yeah, a couple crazy decisions could be the end of us. So I'm a big fan of what's going to get us off planet to keep us alive. And then without getting morbid, if we're going to keep destroying this planet, maybe it's, another species that should inherit.
Well, I read recently that a lot of scientists think that there's been 5 cataclysmic, like world extinction events in the Earth's history. If you follow the science and the carbon and things like that, and that depending on where those dates fell, we are far, far, far overdue. If you ever talk to someone who lives in California, they always say that like the big one is long overdue, and the more that they don't get that 10 point whatever earthquake, the more freaked out everybody gets in LA because it's overdue.
Yeah.
So if we've had 5 mass extinction events in the planet's history and we're overdue for the 6th, and here we are saying, screw it, we'll just keep going the way we're going. It's like, it doesn't bode well.
Well, with that, there's something that was floating around in my head that maybe we can get back to, which is, I've heard some really wonderful stories. I always look for the good in people, and some larger than life figures in our industry who I don't think would realize I'd call them a mentor. Sometimes you don't have to interface with somebody to consider them a mentor. Like a lot of people could lean on a Steve Jobs as, or a David Goggins as somebody that's gotten them to change for the better. I'll tell two little quick stories. One is Michael Amini, who is a larger than life figure in our industry, big glamorous company. I heard a story years ago that when he was an unknown, a single person entrepreneur at maybe the San Francisco gift market, setting up a temporary space, his booth was finished well in advance of show opening, and he sat there polishing and fixing every last detail till like 2 a.m, perhaps unnecessarily so.
Right.
And this was a story of a magazine editor who knew him back then, and he
Okay.
doesn't even know that I know this story. I doubt you're listening, Michael, but if you are, that stuck with me because
And also, that's amazing. Thank you.
yeah, because here's somebody that if you didn't know the history, you could
Right.
say, look at this guy, he's got it so easy, giant
Yeah.
company,
It just falls into his lap.
just fell into his lap probably.
Overnight success.
The other one is all of these larger than life people that I've been fortunate enough to get to know and reach out to, they always pick up the phone on like the second ring, not the second phone call attempt. Like they pick up
I
their
noticed
phone. Yeah,
noticed
these are
that.
the busiest people.
Yep.
It's always the people that say they're so busy that are unreachable.
Absolutely.
And I've met some pretty busy people and they're always reachable. Maybe not always, but it's just such a powerful thing that I try to remember when I get a phone call and I'm in the middle of something. I'm like, but didn't Bob Marisech answer the phone when I called him, or Nito Quabain,
As you are telling the story, this is kind of an incredible segue, and this is just a very quick, but oddly enough, do you know who fits that bill for me is actually your dad, because your dad has got this unique ability to remember a conversation had the previous market and pick it right back up. And I am nobody. And so when I start talking to Mark and he just immediately falls right back into pretty much what we were talking about 6 months ago,
Wow.
I'm like, I am nobody, this guy. And somehow he remembers every detail of this conversation. It really makes you feel, and you're right. So in terms of mentor, I try to do that. I try very hard. I'm very bad with names, but I'm very good with faces.
Yeah.
And so I try to remember, why do I know this face? I need to remember what we were talking about last time, because I know from the receiving side how that makes you feel when you think, wow, it's incredible that he remembered me.
And it's a gift he has for that, sure.
That is interesting you say that, because I agree.
And I think everybody has a capacity, because I used to be more nervous and now I'm quite comfortable.
Right.
And it's comfortable to be comfortable.
Yes,
it's like
it
a
is.
snowball effect.
Yeah.
When you are thinking about 100 other things,
Right.
you're never going to remember a name or a face. And the more you could just be present in the moment,
Right.
it makes things melt away. I was forced to conduct sales meetings right out of college to 50 salespeople. That wasn't fun. Winning we were so lucky to win a few awards. You have to get on stage and talk. Like that might scare some of the best designers away from ever submitting for another award, but to do it, to not shy away from it. I also learned that on camera, you might feel like you're sweating. That doesn't really pick up too much on camera, but your voice shaking picks up. So it's like, what are those things? It was such like a gift to realize like, oh, you're not seeing my sweat or my red face when I'm on camera, but I can control my voice. It's okay if I'm sweating. Just these little things that you pick up along the way. I know what it feels like to feel uncomfortable. I don't want people to feel like that, I know what it feels like when you're not sure if your company is sustainable, but to realize like there are things most companies are already doing that they can be bragging about. And then there are small steps you can take.
Yep.
And then there are the bigger decisions that you have to address.
And those you approach those organically by conquering the smaller steps and getting to a point where this is no longer uncharted, scary territory.
Yep.
We start with where we can, and then we just kind of grow and evolve from there.
Yep.
Fear of public speaking. Myself, I suffer terribly from imposter syndrome, which is terrible for a creative director of a creative agency to have imposter syndrome. So when I stand up and panels, during market, when I host those panels, I pretty much have to immediately tell everybody I suffer from imposter syndrome. And what I have noticed is in terms of an icebreaker,
I love that. Yeah.
every single designer in that room is nodding their head because everybody does. All
Everybody. Yeah.
creatives
Yeah.
have that idea that somebody is better. I'm not good at what I do. Why would anyone listen to anything I have to say? You
And
know?
the power of people coming up to you after a talk, like those
Yes.
are the brave souls who come up to you and say, you did a great job.
Yeah.
Most of us need that,
They do.
you know, and they're assuming somebody else. It's like the pretty girl at the bar thinks, you think you have no shot because
Right.
everyone probably is telling them they're pretty. They probably aren't getting told that.
Everybody is thinking I have no shot, and so they go home
So the
alone.
one person that says it, don't go out there and just start hitting on girls at the bar.
We're not encouraging.
We're not encouraging that. But it's an interesting kind of way to look at things that we all have to step out of our comfort zone.
Agreed.
To get comfortable. There's like two ways. Another thing I read recently was you could either be the most interesting person in the room, which is hard to accomplish, or you could be the most interested person in the room. If I can make you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room, you're going to leave that conversation like, wow, I love that guy.
Absolutely.
Or I love that brand. So we're always, something I pay attention to at Phillips Collection a lot is it's always, this is what we did. This is what we came up with. It's not how great we are. It's we want to show the world what we did. But a lot of times our customers need to understand, why is that important to me? Right. My best customers, and I say that kind of like the easiest people to join our ecosystem, are people that just get it right away. But that's not everyone. So for the rest, who I think could become customers, it's about telling them why purchasing from us is going to improve their projects, and we're going to be seamless to work with, and you're going to get all the wows you wanted. But like, what is it that makes potential customers tick? And even for your business, companies that want to tell their story, that feel like they haven't told it properly, that you get in front of and you show your portfolio to, whether it's a brewery and they're selling lamps, they're like, I want that.
Right. No,
it's just communicating that you could tell their story.
Absolutely.
Who doesn't want to tell their story?
I heard a long time ago, and it's a longer quote, and I won't even try to remember it, but a conversation is 99% listening and 1% talking.
Yep.
And that's something that I have learned, in my own journey. If you allow somebody a platform to talk, they will talk. But if you listen to them and don't just wait for the next thing that, like the next lull, but if you actually listen to what they're saying, they open up more and more, and it will inspire. And most of the time you walk away thinking, I was not ready for that conversation, but that was the best conversation I could have possibly had.
I love it.
Because you go into it without the idea of like, well, I want to ask them about this, and the other. Instead, you just go in and say, let's talk, and I do think that, when we talk about, the Phillips Collection story, you do have the legacy, you have the iconic design that you have the sustainability story, and you have, the community, outreach approach. Like you are sort of hitting on all cylinders right now as a company, while keeping true to yourself. Like you are still designing the things that everybody will come to know and love as Phillips Collection.
Well, now let me tell you everything we do wrong.
Well,
no, I mean, it's thank you. That's very kind of you. We're hypercritical of ourselves, which I think you have to be,
as most creatives.
But it's good to get that reinforcement, because the goal is to do the things that you mentioned.
Right.
To have a niche in the market, to be socially and environmentally responsible, to use our platform for good.
Yes.
And to be confident that, I rarely use the word competition. I don't know who my competition is.
Oh, yeah, we're the same.
I'm friends. Yeah, you have to be. I mean, there will be a day where you obviously have very close competitors,
right,
going for the same accounts, but when they'll be too busy and they throw you a bone, like you hear that so much in the industry.
100%.
I don't have the capacity for that right now. Why don't you go to Four Hands?
Absolutely. It's a huge industry, but a very small community. You know, and we don't see competition. We see collaboration. There was a day especially in the creative, industry and commercial art, graphic design,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it now, but where there was a gatekeeper mentality of this is mine, stay away. We and us as a company, but the folks that we align ourselves with, we are all very much of this is a massive industry that we're in, and there's a place for everybody. And our customers are, we want to introduce our customers to other people. We want to get to know other people.
Yeah.
We want, I believe, and I've said before multiple times on this podcast, we are on the cusp of a second creative revolution like we saw in the 60s. And I
Mm.
think that if we continue the collaboration, if we continue the conversations around design, sustainability, and togetherness, that idea that this isn't a silo, and there's no reason to, gatekeep secrets and, things
Mhm.
like that. Everybody benefits.
Yeah.
Nobody is left out in the cold in that world. There are customers that we are going to be exceptionally adapted to, service. Part of that ability to service that is to know, who'd be a perfect fit for you, these other people that we work with. They're going to realize your look.
Here, here.
And I
Yeah.
think that that's important to know that. But I think, I believe in karma. If you put it out there and you continue to kind of push that positive, energy into the
Mhm.
world, it's going to start becoming cyclical. You want to start seeing that come back. And
Yes.
I don't like the idea that, design, I talked to this, quite a few of our guests about this, but, the idea of a designer, when you say I'm a designer and someone will say, oh, well, you must design, posters or something. Design is such a massive word,
Yeah.
and I think that the more we're starting to accept the fact that it is a ecosystem within the term design,
Mhm.
and High Point is positioning itself as a mecca of design, not
Yeah.
furniture, but design. So what I
Or
want to see,
creativity even is
creativity,
the word.
and
Yeah.
that's what I want to see. I want to see more
Yeah.
creatives and more professionals flood into this area,
Yes.
because what will furniture look like in 20 years if we do?
Yeah.
What will our
I
home
love it. Yeah.
furnishings? Let's get rid of agreeable gray. Like
Mhm.
let's figure out like how all of these different design industries are actually all part of one much larger ecosystem. And
Yeah.
I know it's there. We see it. Automotive design influences furniture design.
Yep.
Furniture design influences fashion design. Fashion design influences home design.
Mhm.
Like we have the ability to do this. And if we stop isolating ourselves from different parts of the word design or
Mhm.
creativity, I think that the entire world
Yeah.
benefits. We are
I
the world.
yeah, well said. I have nothing to add to that. But I do think that yes, I think things are trending that way quickly. The new generations, and they're almost micro generations, don't want what their parents had if it's jammed down their throats. So it's like they want to put their own print on things. They have taste, they have confidence in their look. There's enough stuff out there. I think we all just have to fight fast fashion, and you're seeing a lot of it come. We source product around the world, but I'm talking
Right.
about cheap disposable product coming in
Yep.
through mass markets, Temu,
Yep.
Shein,
Absolutely.
all of that. It's the the carbon footprint of that is
It
massive.
is.
It's absolutely massive.
It is. And it's disposable. It doesn't bring joy, it doesn't
Yeah,
bring a purpose. And if it does, it's a hyper limited purpose. But
yeah,
the harm that it causes, not just to the environment, but to other brands. If you say brand A makes a watch for $500,
hmm,
brand B can make almost the same looking watch out of much inferior parts, but hey, it's only $20.
hmm,
Use it for a day or two, it's going to break, and throw it away, and then go back and go buy another one. You're hurting the quality craftsmanship story of those pieces that do have that painstaking care, the
yeah,
legacy, the design. You're hurting the quality story of your entire industry by introducing these very disposable, very, have it today, throw it away tomorrow.
hmm,
And I personally, I would love to see things like that. And I don't know how we reverse that necessarily,
yeah.
because I think that
Sort of
unfortunately
a
a lot of our
learning curve.
younger generations are more
Yeah.
inclined to be disposable.
And look, we're humans, so sometimes you just have to hear it. You have to
Right.
experience it.
Yep.
You can tell me the stove is hot. I'm gonna try to
Still
touch
touch it.
it.
Yeah.
I need to know.
Yep.
How
Spoken
hot
like a
is it?
dad.
Is it hot for you or hot for me? All right, that's hot for both of us.
Is it warm?
Yeah. But yeah, there are so many lessons that you just have to learn.
Right.
Um, I feel like I'm stealing from Chris Williamson, the Modern Wisdom podcast, but he talks about this a lot. He's very introspective, and it's there are certain lessons that and tragic moments. You lose a loved one, and you grieve, and you realize how many toxic things were in your life, that it could sound cliche in those moments, but it's like you had to have experienced it. Nobody can tell you that. You can't just internalize a soundbite. That's why it's lovely when you can hear something, but sometimes you just have to experience it.
I agreed 100%.
Hard work pays off. It's not the destination, it's the journey.
Absolutely.
How can you know that without doing it?
I agree 100%. We are honored and privileged enough to work with so many amazing creatives. And one thing that I have noticed, and it's something that I don't know that I've ever heard this anywhere. So if I'm ripping it off, I apologize, whoever originally said it. But from what I have found in my career, and from the time I went to school up north, and I was slated to go to the CCAD, graduating high school, but 9/11 happened, things changed. The idea of creativity is not something you set out to achieve. You do not, as a creative, you do not say that's going to be my look. It is a rear view look. You get down the road a little bit and you look in the rear view mirror and you say, that was my look, like that was my style. And that's kind of an amazing experience to have when you can sort of have that moment where you're not saying, I want to draw like so-and-so. I want to create like such and such. I want to sing like, but when you look back and you say, oh, that's who I was, that, and I'm sure that, some of the top designers and some of the top creatives in the world had that moment where they look back at their legacy, their body of work, and said, that was not what I set out to do, but organically and with intention, I carved that path. And I think that we do appreciate those journeys more than something that's just handed to us,
so maybe we have to look back more often.
I think we should,
to be more appreciative of what we've accomplished.
I think that that's
and
entirely.
Little victories. I mean, you don't have to have a monumental career to feel like you did something great.
No, you're exactly right. Johnny is one that absolutely celebrates like those little wins. He'll constantly say, something terrible can happen. He'll say, but we didn't run out of gas. He's
I
a
love
constant
that. Yeah,
optimist.
You need people like that in your life.
You do, absolutely.
I don't know how much we need the pessimists, but I have a few of them that I work with, and
yeah.
It's like, okay.
I think they keep us grounded.
Yes, if
as creatives, we tend to float away if someone doesn't drag us back down to earth. So maybe we do need the pessimists too.
Yes, all to keep it humming, yeah.
Well, Jason, I would like to kind of close the conversation by talking about sort of like where Phillips Collection is going, what we're excited about coming into market, towards the end of April, as well as where people can find you, where people can follow you, and learn more about not just your designs, but the story of the design, the story of the legacy, and the story of the sustainability.
Yeah, I feel like we're on Hot Ones, and I get to plug myself at
That's
the end
exactly
without
what this
having
is.
to eat
This
chicken wings. This is lovely.
This was a kind of bizarre podcast in my opinion, because I just glanced over at the clock.
Yeah,
it feels like we've been talking for about 7 or 8 minutes, and it has not.
Oh no!
This was a fantastic conversation.
Well,
so I would love you, plug away, tell us where you're at, what you're doing, and let us follow you, let us be part of this amazing story that Jason, Mark, the entire Phillips Collection family is on.
Yeah. Well, there's always a lot of new coming. So between the High Point markets and the Las Vegas markets, you will see lots of new product getting into more of the home. So think categories that we're not currently in. You're going to start seeing more of those new categories coming. Phillips Co. is our social media handle. So we're very active on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. PhillipsCollection.com is where you can find us online. And if you ever come through the PTI airport, you'll see us. You'll see our display there. So thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jason. I cannot thank you enough. Like I said, this is probably one of my favorite conversations we've had so far on this podcast, because it was It was motivating. We wanted to do this podcast to motivate those that are spending those tireless hours in the evenings, or the student that is grinding through finals, thinking about a creative career, or the hobbyist, or the mom, or the person who's looking at a career change and thinking, I don't know if I've
Mhm.
got it in me. I don't know if I'm the person that can do that. And I feel like this entire conversation was a massive just catapult. And I hope that somebody
Good.
takes the conversation that they heard from you today and they say, I can do that. Like, I can
Mhm.
be the person that stands up. I can be the person that changes the
Yeah.
future. And I can be the person that, creates something that is iconic, in
Yeah.
my own
Work
life.
work hard and celebrate even the mini victories.
I love
And I
that.
think people will be okay.
I love
Yeah.
it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.